Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
And I'm Alex.
Hey, Alex, how's it going today?
It's going well. Another day we get to do another segment of rankings today, which is going to be exciting.
What a great day it is indeed. I just had to roll up my sleeves as we continue our discussion on the 2023 fantasy season. As always, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, and commenting on our podcast videos. Please subscribe to us on the socials. We are on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok with new TikToks out there, Twitter, and Threads with the handle at N2EFantasy. Alex, what position do we have on deck today?
Well, today is all about the quarterbacks. We've got our top 15 quarterbacks going into the fantasy season this year, and that is 15 guys who potentially could be QB1s for you.
All right. Shall
Let's
we get it kicked
just,
off?
yep, just like last time, we are going to start with our lowest rank and we're gonna go up to our top ranked, and we're gonna do it. I do one, Jeff does one, and then we discuss why Jeff is wrong. So here we go.
Hey,
So
I'm usually wrong.
yeah, always. Let's see. All right, let's go with my 15th rank, and that is Aaron Rodgers, the new New York Jets quarterback. I think new team, new season, same Aaron Rodgers, and he's got a little bit more talent to work with than he did last season with the Packers. Jeff, what do you think of Aaron Rodgers here, and who do you have at 15?
So I don't want to pick you apart with your very first pick, but did you know that the last three seasons, with what you just said, worst talent, Rodgers has finished third, sixth, and 13th at quarterback, and you have him at 15th. So you're saying he's going to have a worse year than the last 3 years. Not an average, he's going down.
Well, he is another year older, and we know at some point the production starts to drop off. And I
This is
do
true.
think that they want to run a little bit too. So take a little pressure off of him.
You know I love some Brees Hall, so you don't have to really talk me too far into that one. But I do think Rodgers throws less picks this year, and I do think that he may return to some touchdown prominence. He comes up a little bit later on my list. At number 15 for me is Daniel Jones, and I'm expecting him to build on his season last year where he was the 9th rated quarterback. I do think this Barkley news kind of has me a little more scared on Daniel Jones because I don't want to see this offense if it falls squarely on Daniel Jones' back.
Well, with Daniel Jones, it's kind of yes, is he more efficient with Barkley? Most likely. However, if Barkley holds out, then most of the offense is on to Daniel Jones, which means higher volume, which would also indicate he'd have higher stats than he did previously. He does have another weapon on offense with Waller coming to town, and I do think Waller brings in something that he hasn't had before as a receiving option. So I also think Daniel Jones is a top 15 quarterback. I have him at 14. I previously had him as high as 12, but after some refinement, he's at 14. I know he finished 9, and that is pretty much due to his rushing ability. As with a lot of these fantasy quarterbacks that we're going to talk about, the rushing ability does bring them up to the top, especially with standard kind of scoring where rushing stats are more valuable than passing stats. That's going to be the case. I know there's some oddball leagues out there that overvalue passing stats and treat them the same as rushing, which he would be lower on those lists. But I have
Right.
Daniel Jones at 14. So that's very reasonable to have him at 15, in my opinion, too.
Absolutely. And I have Jones, just we're on a stat basis, I have him at 3,900 yards passing, 20 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 672 yards rushing, and 5 rushing touchdowns.
I mean, that's pretty close to what I have. I have less passing yards. I have 3,500, which is still an improvement over last year, but I have 24 touchdowns. I have 10
Oh,
interceptions, and I have 5 touchdowns on the ground.
rushing. Yeah. How many rushing yards?
I
off
have
the top of
600.
your head.
I
672,
have
so we're
600.
close.
Yeah, it could be more, especially if Barkley holds out. It could be more than 600, and he's done it before, so there's
Yep,
precedence for that too.
there
But
is.
he's a solid quarterback option for you guys to have, if a not so palatable one.
Right.
Not a
It still
very
blows
exciting
my
guy.
yeah, it blows my mind that the Giants gave him 40 million a year. I just don't see it in his stats or his projected stats either, but maybe they know something we don't know, but a year 5 breakout is very 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 rare. So, I know he took them to the playoffs last year, but I will march to the beat of Barkley led them there. The offense ran through Barkley. Well, his passing stats might go up. They also might throw more interceptions, and he might have to rush the ball more, which puts him more at risk also because they don't really have much behind Barkley. And as we've covered on a previous episode, Barkley could hold out. Do I fully expect him to right now? I think it's more 50-50 than anything, but it's an option that Barkley currently has. My number 14 is Kirk Cousins, and he's returning to an offense where he has Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne. I don't think Madison's too far of a drop off from Cook. And he also has TJ Hawkinson returning. So I just think that he has so many passing weapons. I think their defense is so bad that he's going to be forced to throw the ball a lot. What do you think about my number 14 quarterback here?
I think that for me, that's a little bit low for him, and I can kind of break that down why I think that's low, and I can put a little bit of a quarterback A, quarterback B statistic out there for you if that's something you'd be interested in. So I've saw some stats for Cousins and another prominent quarterback out there. So let's just do a blind test here, and we have quarterback A over 80 games since 2018 had a 67.8 completion percentage,
Mm-hmm.
had 20,934 passing yards, had a 261.7 passing yards per game, had 153 touchdowns, 50 interceptions, and a 100.9 passer rating, or QB rating to be specific, actually. And we have quarterback B, over 77 games since 2018, had a completion percentage of 62.5%, had 18,397 passing yards, had 238.9 passing yards per game, had 138 touchdowns, 60 interceptions, and a quarterback rating of 92.2. So who is quarterback A and who is quarterback B?
So quarterback A is not Kirk Cousins. I'm going with quarterback B is Kirk Cousins.
No, quarterback A is Kirk Cousins.
What? And who is
Quarterback A
quarterback
is
B?
Josh Allen.
Wow.
So I think Kirk Cousins is wildly underrated by people. Obviously, Josh Allen makes up the difference with his ground game, which is a very important feature for him. And it's why everyone has Josh Allen towards the top of the quarterback list, which is fair. But on the passing side, Kirk Cousins is much better than people think. And he's coming into a second year of that new offense, second year with a weapon like TJ Hawkinson. He has the best wide receiver in the NFL on every metric. And he now has Jordan Addison as the Robin to Justin Jefferson's Batman, who I think is the perfect system fit for the Vikings, along with KJ Osborne. So I think he has a very, very talented offense. Like you said, the defense is a little porous, so they're going to have to do a lot more on the offensive side. Multiple people have pointed out that Kirk Cousins' quarterbacking efficiency is better without Dalvin Cook. I don't think that Madison is the receiving option that Dalvin Cook is either. So I think that it's going to go to these wide receivers in the tight end. And I think Kirk Cousins is due for another big year. So I think I have Kirk Cousins a little bit higher than you,
All right.
and we
So
can talk about that later.
we'll be in suspense here. I know you just sat on your soapbox here of Kirk Cousins. So I would love to hear a little bit more about him later, but I do have him statistically pretty high this year at like 4,500 yards, 4,595 yards. 34 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, only 126 yards rushing and one rushing touchdown. But I think that's the pitfall, downfall, whatever you want to call it, of Cousins. But he has finished QB11, and QB7 the last 3 years. So there is that.
Yeah, he's getting better. Where some quarterbacks are getting worse, like Aaron Rodgers. Kirk Cousins is actually improving, and it's a really good offense, and it's the second year in it, so I have high hopes for him. Our stats are very very similar. I have 4,800 yards. I still have 34 touchdowns like you. I actually have 14 interceptions, which is a little bit higher. 100 yards rushing, but I have 2 rushing touchdowns.
Absolutely.
So very close.
It is. It is. I would love to hear who your number 13 is.
My number 13 is a rookie quarterback. I know it's a faux pas, but I have Anthony Richardson, the new Colts quarterback, who is going to start all 17 games this year from week 1 on. I have Anthony Richardson as my number 13 quarterback, and it's not due to his passing stats, which are okay. It's due to the presumed rushing stats and how prominent mobile quarterbacks have become in this modern league. I see a lot of ground game for him. I see that they're probably going to do more passing plays, which will end up being quarterback runs because they're going to struggle, because they're going to play from behind, because the Colts are not a very good team. I think he's going to basically be the whole focal point of the offense. Yes, I think Jonathan Taylor is going to get his. I think Pittman is probably going to get a decent amount, although Anthony Richardson's forte seems to be, besides running the ball, throwing it deep. So someone like Alec Pierce might get good stats this year too. But ultimately, I'm really high on Anthony Richardson this year. And this is actually me after knocking down some of his stats. So I previously wanted to put him higher. So, Jeff, I know you have some thoughts.
Ooh, I don't even know where to start with this. Richardson is not even in my top 20 quarterbacks. I think you spoke out of both sides of your mouth on the opinion that you just had because you said they would be playing from behind, which would cause a lot of quarterback runs. I feel like you throw the ball more when you're behind, not run the quarterback more when you're behind. So that kind of doesn't really fit together for me. And
You
then
run
also,
on a broken pass play, though.
but
Quarterbacks run on
also,
broken pass plays all the time.
right. I mean, that does happen. But on the other side of that, they still have Jonathan Taylor. They're not going to want their rookie quarterback taking these hit after hit this early in his career when they are not a contender this year. You feed Jonathan Taylor 20, 25 times a game, and you use the read option as a way to make more holes for Jonathan Taylor. So I think his rushing is overrated this year. I think that his passing is not there. And I know we've talked about this offline, but I will die on this hill that if the Colts do get a top 2 pick next year, they will take one of the 2 generational quarterbacks out of the draft and they will move on from Anthony Richardson the same way the 49ers have already moved on from Trey Lance. Like Trey Lance was a 3rd overall pick. Anthony Richardson was a 5th overall pick. And if you remember correctly, Josh Rosen was a top 10 pick for the Cardinals, and they moved on with him after 1 year as well. So this does happen, and I easily could happen with this team this year.
I mean, I don't see that happening in this situation. I think Josh Rosen was even more questionable at the time he was drafted than Anthony Richardson was. And Anthony Richardson is a top 4 pick compared to Rosen, who I think was the 10th pick in his draft. I don't I don't see them abandoning Anthony Richardson. And I think the model for a struggling, terrible team that relies on a rushing quarterback to make plays was pretty much set by Justin Fields last year with the Bears, who had 1,100 yards. So I'm not even going that high with Anthony Richardson, and I think that a lot of the AFC South and then also the NFC South, which they're going to be playing on their schedule, are pretty winnable games, and it's pretty relatively easy schedule. So I can see them running with Anthony Richardson and with all the running backs who are trying to get paid out there. I mean, maybe the team schemes away from Jonathan Taylor a little bit to lower his price tag so they don't have to pay him as much next year for his upcoming contract extension. So it's very much within the realm of possibility for what I have for him. I only have him throwing 3,300 passing yards with 20 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, but I have him rushing for 800 yards and 6 touchdowns, which, like I said, it's 343 yards less than Justin Fields with a terrible Bears team that had the first overall pick. who also kept their quarterback rather than drafting a quarterback. So I think it's very feasible that not only does he put those kinds of stats up, but they keep him and do not take a quarterback and might take a sweetheart deal with someone else to who wants to trade up and trade a bunch of assets for a high pick if they end up in the top 2 spot.
So I will rebut a few things there. I do think the Bears would have moved off of Justin Fields this year if there was a generational quarterback this year. I don't believe there was one. And I do believe that the Colts would easily move off Anthony Richardson. So, and I also believe that Justin Fields is a better thrower of the football at this point than Anthony Richardson is. And if we look at Justin Fields' rookie year, because I know you keep comparing his sophomore year to Anthony Richardson's rookie year, and I feel like that's an apples to oranges comparison. In his rookie year, he had 12 games and only 420 yards rushing.
Okay.
It's not
So
as
that's
easy.
that's 12 games. And if you added 5 more games to that, it would probably be what, in the
Another
600s
200,
at
another 200
least?
yards. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that Anthony Richardson is a better rusher.
Okay. I think they're gonna. I think they're gonna face 8-man boxes between Jonathan Taylor and him. So it'll
It's
be
possible,
interesting.
but unlike Justin Fields, Anthony Richardson's built like a linebacker and will knock those guys down and break tackles. So I'm like I said, I'm very high on Anthony Richardson. You're on the opposite end of the spectrum.
I am.
Maybe the
I
truth
am.
is somewhere in the middle, but I am very optimistic for his career, and I think he starts off solidly for fantasy purposes. I think quarterback 20 is probably pretty close to a real NFL ranking rather than fantasy, but we'll see.
I think he's closer to 32 in a real quarterback ranking.
No,
Yes,
no,
absolutely.
Jeff. With Desmond Ritter out there and Sam Howell and Baker Mayfield, come
Yeah,
on.
I think he's bottom five.
No, I don't see it.
Well, I need to see it on the field first, but also going to 2024 draft. Also going to the 2024 draft, I believe that if they could get a generational talent, they will, because rushing quarterbacks do not last as long in the NFL. And why would you want 8 years of Anthony Richardson when you could get 15 years of a generational talent? Like it makes it's a no brainer for me.
I think that that scenario is going to come up for the Arizona Cardinals with Kyler Murray next year, not with Anthony Richardson. But I digress. Let's move on to the number 12 quarterback that I have here, and that is
What
Dak
about
Prescott.
what about my number 13? We passed my number 13.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's backtrack.
I got
Jeff,
you
what is your number
so
13?
upset about Anthony Richardson that we skipped my number 13. But I do know your number 12 now. My number 13 is not your number 12. My number 13 is Russell Wilson, who will have a bounce back year under Sean Payton. He has the best wide receiver core, maybe in the NFL. Like he has the most talent around him. He has Tim Patrick, Mims, Sutton, Judy. He has Dulcich. He has who's the other tight end? They brought in Troutman. They've brought in so much talent. They have Javante and they have P Ryan that's a good pass catching running back. They have everything there, and I believe that Sean Payton will restore some of Russell Wilson's luster because they're going to scale it back and bring it back to what it was more in Seattle, more what Drew Brees was in New Orleans. They're going to kind of have like a hybrid of that. And I do like Russell Wilson for a bounce back year this year.
I have Russell Wilson outside my top 15, but he was a honorable mention. I'll put it that way. I do think he bounces back. I don't think he has the best wide receiver core. I think he has the deepest wide receiver core, which is a little bit different. But I think that he has a chance to rebound and bring back his glory days. But I just don't see it in the top 15. But Jeff, out of all those wide receivers you mentioned, which one's the top wide receiver? That's the question everyone wants to know.
I mean, the rumor out there is Tim Patrick.
Tim Patrick. So I kind of feel like it's Cortland Sutton. Last year, everyone thought he'd be the next Cooper Kupp. And I think he, out of the ones that they have on their roster, reminds me the most of Michael Thomas with what they had on the Saints. So I think he's probably most likely. However, Jerry Jeudy is the athletic one everybody likes. Mims is a future guy. I don't know if he does anything this year, but that's just how I see it. But I think there's the talent's there. It's just a tough division.
I mean, and at the end of the day, it wouldn't shock me if they traded one of the top three non-rookie wide receivers from Denver to another team. But they were shopping them pre-draft, but they never got what they were asking. So it's just an interesting. Little tidbit.
Yeah, reminds me of a certain dynasty league that I'm familiar with. Very similar there.
Yep. Let's hop to your number 12. I know you already said it, but let's hear it again.
My number 12 is Dak Prescott, and I think that he's a slight downgrade from previous years, but ultimately he's probably going to be healthy this year, so he probably plays the full season. So he won't struggle as much as last year and not playing off an injury. And now they brought in Brandon Cooks. Gallup should be as healthy as he's been for a while. I think they have Tolbert there as well. They have two tight ends that they like, and Ferguson and the rookie that they drafted as well. So they should still be solid on offense. The concern is how serious were they about when they said they just want to run the ball? I don't think they have the personnel to run the ball like they said that they wanted to with just Pollard and Rojo basically there. And then you like Deuce. I think he's more of a gadget guy and more of a receiver out of the backfield than a rusher. I think they probably have to pass despite what they said. I think Dak has always been like a top 10 kind of finisher when he's played a full season, but I have him at 12 here. Jeff, how do you feel about that spot and who do you have?
So I have Dak at number 12 as well. I do feel like he cuts down on interceptions a bit. I do think that anything that you heard about them running the ball more, I just don't really see it with their current crop of running backs. So I think you're going to see a lot of the same last year. Maybe Dak will make better decisions, but we'll find out and we'll see what that looks like in the season. But I do really like Dak this year. He's my top 12 quarterback. So like he would be the end of the QB ones for me.
Yep. We both agree on that. All right. So
First agreement.
I know, right? I'm sure it'll get much closer the further we get up the list. But at number 11, I have Trevor Lawrence there, and I think he's pretty steady there. I think he finished in a similar spot last year. I think that Calvin Ridley should improve, and he's secured his tight end with Evan Ingram. He has Christian Kirk returning. Zay Jones is there. Uh, they got a great running back with ETN. They brought in Tanks Bigsby. I think that the offense is looking up for them in a wide open division, which they probably are the front runners. So I really like Trevor Lawrence there. He could be higher on your list. But Jeff, how do you feel about this spot for him and who do you have?
Well, this would be 2 for 2 in a row here because I also
Oh,
have Trevor
snap.
Lawrence at 11, and I feel the same way with you. I feel like he's on the upward trajectory, and I think Ridley only helps him. I think bringing back his weapons from last year really help him. I think Tank Bigsby really helps him. I think ETN actually now having a full, pretty healthy year under his belt helps him, and I think that Zay Jones is the one weapon that takes a step back and that's kind of where Calvin Ridley gets some of his stats.
Yeah, I agree there. It's certainly looking up for them, and I certainly don't like having a division rival position so well, but we can move on to my number 10, which Jeff, I know you don't have here, just based on how you feel about him, but I have Mr. Comeback Player of the Year, Geno Smith, at number 10. They added Jackson Smith and Jigba to go with Lockett and DK Metcalf. They added Charbonnet into that backfield, who is also a very good pass catcher. I think that they've improved as a team, and I think that they're one of the top two teams in that entire division, one of the top teams in the NFC going into this year. So, Jeff, why am I wrong about this, and who do you have at number 10?
Why am I wrong at this? Your famous last words. So, Geno Smith has played in the league for roughly 10 years now. So, he's a 10th year breakout, which defies logic. I don't believe he repeats the year that he had last year. I think that was a one time thing for Geno. He's 32 years old. He's a rushing quarterback. We all know rushing quarterbacks, they lose their legs first. I just think that Geno is going to regress heavily this year. I think the Seahawks schedule gets more difficult this year. It's the most travel by any team in the league. I do believe the Rams are still the second best team in the division. We're comparing the Rams that took Baker Mayfield off of the street and inserted him into a football game last year with the one that has the Super Bowl championed Stafford and Cup. I think it's a different team, and I think we're being very short-sighted on the Rams. They traded away a cornerback. Cornerbacks do not win games. Quarterbacks win games, and that was why we needed to have Stafford back. We need to get Cooper Kupp back, and we will see what they can do. I honestly, at the end of the day, I would not be shocked if the Rams at some point bring in a Kenny Golladay, someone that has a chemistry with Stafford. But I do think Geno is due for regression. Not a huge regression. I know he finished quarterback 5 last year, but I don't want to be too nearsighted to factor in his previous years and just think about last year. But he's going to come in around QB 16 or 17 for me. So he is still going to be rosterable. He's just not going to be startable for me.
Yeah, I strongly disagree. And I already downgraded him from QB5 to QB10, Jeff. So I feel like that's far enough. I think with all the weapons they have and the fact that he's now proven himself to not just be a rushing quarterback, he's actually more of a passing quarterback. Now, at this stage of his career, he made the transition. He is the exception to the rule, and he still slings it, man. Like I love watching some training camp highlights of him just slinging it to these awesome wide receivers who are almost quarterback proof. So I think that even if Geno Smith takes a dive efficiency wise, he's got these amazing receiving options to throw to. So like you said, they're going to be traveling a lot, which means they may have to pass more to play catch up. They may have some mistakes that they have to improve upon. Typically, defense is better at home, so that means their defense is going to be worse at away fields, which means their offense is going to have to perform. So I'm I'm pretty high on Gino getting some fantasy stats this year.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective that's more recency bias. It was 1 year. I think it's going to be his career year, and he's going to be a one-hit wonder and done, especially at the age of 32.
We shall see, Sir Jeffrey. Sir Jeffrey, who do you have at number 10?
I have Mr. Aaron Rodgers at number 10. So he does improve 3 spots from the year before. He does upgrade his weapons, upgrades his running back. I know Aaron Jones is a great running back, but I do believe Brees Hall is entering his prime right now. And I believe that Aaron Jones is on the back half of his prime. So I do believe that as we enter the season here, it may take a little while for Rodgers and team to get chemistry, but he did show up to OTAs and voluntary camps, and he's been doing everything possible to try to start gaining a rapport with his receivers. And I would feel much more comfortable taking Aaron Rodgers than Geno Smith entering drafts this year.
Even though Aaron Rodgers is 50 years old?
He is entering the twilight of his career, and he probably should be entering a retirement home soon, but he said not yet.
No concerns that he disappears into a dark cave or goes to a Taylor Swift concert the night before a game or anything like that?
He's trying to fit in with the New York crowd, and he's trying to win over the fan base and relatively quickly. And I actually do think he's succeeding in that. And I think Hard Knocks is only going to help him.
The best way to do that is to win games. So if the Jets do really well this year, he's going to fit in just fine with that New York crowd.
They have a hard start to the season too.
They have a hard division.
They do. They do. They're going to have to put up some points to win some of those games, especially against Josh Allen, especially against Tua and Tyreek. I love how when we mention Tua, we have to say Tua and Tyreek. Like, it's not like Tua's thing. It's like he's only doing it because of his weaponry around him.
I mean, there is that caveat. And if Tyreek wasn't there, maybe more credit would go to Tua. But we digress here. But at number 9, I have the infamous Kirk Cousins that we discussed earlier. So that is where I see him. I don't want to get too crazy and have him too high. I think he's still a value because I think he's probably going at quarterback 16 in most ADPs out there. So getting the ninth quarterback that low is probably pretty much a steal for you guys. And he seems to go that way every single year, even though he almost always outperforms the mid-round quarterback selection. But Jeff, how do you feel about Kirk Cousins at 9, and who do you have here?
I mean, I have him at 14, as we've already discussed. And I mean, the difference between the ninth and the 14th quarterback for me in a points per game basis is 7 points. So, so if you
Razor
want to,
thin.
yeah, if you want to reorder these any type of way or anything like that, that is a huge caveat of this. Follow what you believe in, especially at the quarterback position. We're just making arguments of why you should select these people or why you shouldn't select these people. My number 9 here is Deshaun Watson, who I expect a bounce back year. He's really upgraded his weaponry with more. I believe they drafted a rookie. I think he's one of your favorite rookie wide receivers, Tillman. They also have Amari Cooper coming back and Njoku, and Nick Chubb should be one of the top running backs in the league. If anyone's poised for a comeback, it's going to be Deshaun Watson. It'll be interesting to see if the NFL would give him a comeback player of the year award.
But it's funny that
Uh,
you say Deshaun Watson because I have him at my number 8 quarterback. And I have tried very hard to not have a prejudice against Deshaun Watson because of how things went down with him and the Texans, and then him going to the Browns and all the shady stuff that he was accused of doing. And I don't know if he ever admitted specifically wrongdoing, but he apologized for the situation. I do think him with the full season, with all the weapons you mentioned, and let's not forget Peoples Jones, David Bell. They have other running backs behind Chubb that are also decent, and Joku, all that kind of stuff at tight end. They have the weapons. It's a tough smash mouth division, the AFC North, with Pittsburgh and the Ravens and the Bengals. It's going to be hard for them to get the wins. But when it comes to the stats, which is what we're concerned about fantasy wise, I think he's going to get the stats with the full season. I think he may not have as many passing stats as some of these other quarterbacks, but he's going to have a decent amount, and he's going to get some on the ground too. It's characteristically something that he's always done, and they want him to justify that fully guaranteed contract that he had that almost broke the league. So I think at you have him at 9, I have him at 8, very close. I think that he is someone that people are going to be very high on this year. Whether or not you actually want to take him, whether you don't like him, you don't think he's going to do that, or you just don't like the moral aspect of it, that's your call. But I think how he finishes is probably 8, 9, like you said too.
yeah, and I like that we're really close with him in this section of our ranks because it does show that there might be a consensus on moving Watson up slowly. All right, so my number 8. You ready for my number 8?
I'm
And
ready.
he's
Lay
probably
it on
not.
me.
He may not even be in your top 15, but he may be. I would be a little surprised if he made it above Deshaun Watson in this level. But at number 8, I have Kyler Murray, and I do believe he plays the majority of the season.
So I don't have him in my top 15, and that's not because I don't think he can put stats up, because he's proven he can when he plays a full season. My issue is I'm not sure he's going to play a full season. That being said, even calculating for him missing time, he is at number 18 for me, so he's just outside this list. I think on a per game basis, if I broke it down for points per game, he would probably be right where you put him too. So I don't think it's unreasonable. I personally don't want to pull that trigger on him, but I don't fault you at all for having him at number 8, especially if you think he's going to play at least 16 games in the season. So that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I kind of expected you to say that, so that's not a shocker.
My number 7, which would be Justin Herbert out of
I
the
didn't
Los Angeles
expect.
Chargers. I don't know if you think that's low or you think that's high. But Justin Herbert in the real NFL is one of the top passing quarterbacks in the league right now. Fantasy wise, he's one of the few quarterbacks on my top 15 that really doesn't provide that much in rushing stats. I think it's mostly through the air for him. He has Keenan Allen, who has been a phenomenal possession wide receiver who has constantly performed when he's played full seasons and even played just mostly the season. He has Mike Williams, who I think is a really good talent, who also struggles with the health a little bit, but they supplemented that with the new wide receiver, the rookie wide receiver Johnston out of TCU, who potentially could fill the role for either of these guys in the pass game if they miss time. They still have Palmer, who is also a solid guy, and they have, I believe, Everett at tight end. Cannot forget Mr. Eckler at running back, who had 1,000 yards receiving on 100+ receptions last year. I think these guys all help Herbert be a top quarterback. You can make a case higher, but I think a lot of these top guys are pretty close. So that's my number 7. Jeff, how do you feel about Herbert, and who do you have at 7?
I do think that's too low for Herbert. I know he finished QB 11 last year with a bum shoulder, but the year before, and this is kind of why I look back a few years, he finished QB 2. So he has QB 2 potential, and I don't know if a lot of quarterbacks that we talk about coming up that'll actually have QB 1 or 2 potential, but I know for sure Herbert does. All right. So that brings me to my number 7 in Lamar Jackson. And I do believe that Lamar rushes less, passes more. I think he throws for 4,000 yards for the first time in his career. It should be something that happens this year because this is the most weaponry that he has had. What do you think about Lamar there?
I think Lamar could fit there. I think that really these top seven, in my opinion, you can really organize them in whatever way you want to because you can make a case for any of these guys. And Lamar, like you said, theoretically will run less. I think he might actually run the same amount and pass more. And let's not forget that he's had some struggles with health the last couple seasons. So if he plays all 17 games, I think he could be higher than number 7. So I can't fault you for having him there, and especially if you like other quarterbacks more. I have him a little further up the list, though.
Oh, so spoiler alert coming up soon.
Mm,
But Lamar's never thrown for over 3,100 yards in a season. So my 4,000 yards is a bit of a bold take, and we'll see if I
you're,
was right.
yeah, I mean, I could say mine now, or I could wait till we get to him on my list.
Well, we can wait. Who do you have at number 6?
At number 6, I have one of the self-proclaimed top 5 best rushing quarterbacks of all time. Self-proclaimed, granted, like I said. Justin Fields out of Chicago. Do I think he throws for 4,000 yards this year? I do not. I do think he runs less than he did last year, but still quite a lot. I have him going 3,600 passing yards for 27 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and I have 800 rushing yards. That's 347 less than last year and 6 touchdowns on the ground. So, Jeff, how do you feel about Justin Fields here, and who do you have at 6?
It is a solid pick for me because I also have Justin Fields at 6. I have him right around the 3,500 yard mark. I have it at 3,521, 23 touchdowns to 13 interceptions, and 1,016 yards rushing. So down a little bit from the year before, but I expect him to play in all the games and be a little more healthy this year. But we'll see what happens with that.
So you still have him rushing 1,100 yards?
1,016 yards.
1,016. So still over 1,000. Man, if he gets that 4,000 though, the 4,000 passing yards, like he says he guarantees for Chicago, does that make him the number one
It
if that
does.
happens?
It does. I do think he has number 1 quarterback potential. Just he had a great year on the ground last year and he only finished QB 6, so I need to actually see it to believe it. I do find some sort of funny irony that he listed himself as a top 5 quarterback at something and we have him at number 6.
I mean, just outside. But it's interesting. I have a little bit more passing stats than you. You have more rushing stats than me, but still ended up in the same spot.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. So at number 5, I have Mr. Joe Burrow. He's my favorite quarterback in real NFL, but he is on a very crowded top of the line quarterback list. I do think that he is really the last quarterback on my list that is doesn't contribute that much on the ground. And if he did contribute a little bit more on the ground, I think he would be right up there at the number 1 or number 2 spots. But I have him going 4,600 passing yards, 36 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. I still have him getting like 275 rushing yards and a couple touchdowns there. So I like him. I wish I could put him higher on my list, but at number 5, he is for me. And Jeff, who do you have at number 5? Also, what do you think of Burrow here?
So, I mean, obviously, I feel really good about it because Joe Burrow is my number 5 quarterback. I know last year I went in very bullish about him. I was like, he's not going to finish that high, and he ended up finishing the top 4 quarterback last year. I do have some stats slightly lower than you. and he did finish 7th in my projections. But obviously, at this point, projections between number 5 and number 7 were 6 points. So I more follow my gut when it comes down to like such a small gap that like one touchdown can make it go the other way. And so I have Burrow at 46-30, 32 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 211 yards rushing, and 4 touchdowns. And that kind of is where I have him right now. I know you were a little bit up on touchdowns at 35, I believe. Is that correct?
36, 36.
36. Okay.
And I do also have 4 rushing touchdowns. I know I said a couple, but it's really 4. So
That's a
we're
little more than a
almost,
couple.
yeah, we're almost identical, honestly, on these stats.
Yeah, so I do think that that's kind of the full season that you could expect from Burrow if he does play the entire season. We do know that quarterbacks sometimes do get injured, but let's knock on wood for Burrow and hopefully that he can remain healthy throughout the year. Who is your number 4?
So my number 4 is someone you've already mentioned, and that is Lamar Jackson. I think this offense opens things up. It's a more vertical offense, more pass-friendly offense. I think he's got the best weapons he's ever had on this roster now with adding OBJ, Zay Flowers. He already has Mark Andrews. He already has Bateman, who hopefully plays a full season. Hopefully DK Dobbins, JK Dobbins, whatever, Dobbins plays a full season as well. And I think that they're going to be in a lot of competitive games because of how tough that division is, because of how challenging that schedule is going to be. I think that they're going to have to put up more on the offensive side. So I have him going 4,200 passing yards, 29 passing touchdowns, 11 interceptions. And I still have him going for 741 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns because I still think he's going to rush a lot. So, I mean,
Okay.
similar numbers to what Justin Fields would do if he threw 4,000 yards.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I do believe that the new offense is going to be more centered around the pass game. And I think the way to keep Lamar more healthy is to have him rush less and be less fatigued when he takes hits and even in the pocket. Be interesting.
Yeah, yeah, but when it comes to these mobile quarterbacks, sometimes the plays break down on a passing play and they're still going to run it. So, and especially with him and some of these other guys, they're very, very good with their yards per carry coming out of the quarterback position. So I think that they're going to get big plays and he's still going to end up with a big total for rushing yards.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Who do you
So
have at your
so
four?
my number 4 is Justin Herbert. I do think he throws for 4,800 yards, over 4,800 yards. 33 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 236 yards rushing, and 3 touchdowns. He's definitely like on a, in my opinion, for me, he's on tier 2 all by himself.
So we essentially have Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert flipped.
We do. We should have like a bet.
They're both very good. But
They
odds would
are.
be against me because Lamar Jackson hasn't played a full season in quite in a little bit of time. So
When I bet on players' stats, I like to do points per game because that's like a fair thing at the end of the year.
what if he
And
had one game and it was just really high?
then that's, I mean, sometimes it's the cards that you deal. And obviously, you could put a disclaimer like at least 5 games played by each player.
Hmm.
But that is something that I would do 100% is have bets like that.
All right. Well, we have 3 guys left here, so these guys might all be in the same order. I don't know. But at number 3, I have the Philadelphia Eagles quarterback, Jalen Hurts. And that is because even though he is a mobile quarterback, he doesn't get quite the same, and he doesn't get quite the same rushing yards as some of the other guys sometimes. The special Philly quarterback sneak play that they do gets a lot of touchdowns. So I think that he's probably going to break 4,000 passing yards. I have 40-40 for him. I have an increase in passing touchdowns from last year, so I have 25. I think he's pretty good about eliminating mistakes. So I have 8 interceptions. I still have him rushing for 800 yards, but he has 9 rushing touchdowns because of that special play, and that's down from last year where he had 11. So that's still giving him some regression, and he finishes quarterback 3 for me. Jeff, what do you think about Hurts here, and who do you have at number 3?
So I love Jalen this year, but he is not my number 3. My number 3 is going to surprise you. It's going to be Josh Allen. I do think that he throws for 4,300 yards and 37 touchdowns and 14 picks, and he rushes 624 times for 6 yards. But I do believe that he is the number 3 quarterback in the top tier, and I do think the top 3 quarterbacks are like in a tier of their own. But I think Josh Allen's passing numbers take a little bit of a hit this year. He has Diggs and not a lot else that could gobble up a lot of yards. Thoughts on that?
Interesting.
Am I low?
Well, you're only a spot low, Jeff, because I have Mr. Josh Allen at my number 2 spot. It's somewhat similar stats, so I have him going 4,300 passing yards. I have 32 passing touchdowns. I, like you, have 14 interceptions. He does have that gunslinger mentality, but I have him going 725 rushing yards with 6 rushing touchdowns. I do think he's missing Singletary this year. I know that we're expecting a lot from James Cook, who may fill that gap, may exceed that gap. I mean, I don't know. Like you said, at their wide receiver position, Diggs is pretty much what he has predominantly. I know Gabriel Davis contributes some a little bit. They do have Dawson Knox. They did bring in Dalton Kincaid, and maybe those guys can contribute more in the passing game. But he's always been someone who it's not just his passing stats to get him there, it's his rushing stats, and I think he's still going to be doing that. I don't see them really scaling him back unless there's a serious injury scare with his legs that make them pull him back a little bit.
So, yeah, I mean, and we just have the last two flip flopped. I have Jalen Hurts at number 2. I do think that he continues to progress. I know he just got paid, so that does lend a few questions, but I don't believe the money actually starts going into effect until next year. I do believe that this would normally be the last year of his rookie deal. So I do see them scoring pretty similar in points, but I do see Jalen taking the leap up in rushing yards compared to Josh Allen, and I think you said you had 9 touchdowns for Jalen Hurts. Is that correct?
Yeah. Hmm.
I have him at 10. And so we're right in the same ballpark. We feel very similar about that. That's kind of a very high number for a quarterback. So if two people are like really close like that, it should be pretty close. 9.5 touchdowns if you split the difference. Basically, his passing, I can continue to see that progressing because he does have AJ Brown, he has Goddard, he has Devonta Smith, and I think that that has a better receiving core than what the Buffalo Bills have. So I do think that he's going to get really close to Josh Allen in passing, and we'll see if that's enough to continue to move this team forward. We'll be able to see which one of these two quarterbacks that you have at 2 and I have at 3, and you have at 3 and I have at 2. It'll be really interesting to see which order that they finish in, but they should be top quarterbacks because we're in very much agreement here. Unless something goes horribly wrong, they should be a top quarterback this year.
Yep, I agree with that. So, to no one's surprise, my first overall pick, and I'm also assuming your first overall quarterback, I should say, is clearly Jimmy Garoppolo, and he's just gonna light it up this year for the Raiders, right? Is that who we probably have at number 1? No,
We're just trying
no,
to see
we
if I'm paying attention.
yes, I know you had the blank face for but it's clearly Patrick Mahomes. It's hard for me to give someone even 5,000 passing yards, even if it's less than what they did this season before. But I have 5,000 passing yards for him. I have 39 touchdowns. I have 10 interceptions, 350 rushing yards, and I have 3 rushing touchdowns. Patrick Mahomes is just a special quarterback, and basically he outperformed that last year, and maybe he does it again. Maybe he goes even above that. But it's hard for me to buy into that because it seems like every year his receiving group gets worse on paper. Granted, he's got a lot of young guys on the roster this year, and any of them could all of a sudden develop and break out. I know Rasheed Rice, the rookie, is looked good in camp. I know Sky Moore was a second round pick last year. And then they traded for Kadarius Toney, although I think he's more of a gadget guy. Obviously, Travis Kelsey's a beast. McKinnon out the backfield. Pacheco's a good running back. I think even Clyde Edwards-Helaire makes a showing this year as the third running back on that team. But it's hard for me to go below what I have, and it's already less than last year. And I just think that it's hard for any of these quarterbacks to pass him at this point. Jeff, is Patrick Mahomes your number one? And if not, what are you smoking over there?
Hold on, let me check my sheet here. Yep, he is. 100%. I have him over the 5,000 yard mark, and I know that you might think that's a little bit insane because 5,000 yards is hard. 5,000 yards with no wide receivers is harder. And I don't think he has like a true like number one. He may not even have a true number two wide receiver. And that's even more amazing that they won the Super Bowl last year. He'll rush like a little bit, 364 yards and 3 touchdowns. But he's my only quarterback in the 4 points per touchdown, scoring over 400 points right now. So he's definitely an advantage, but he's only a 0.6 advantage over Jalen Hurts. So taking one of those two is a great thing. Taking the first one of those two, it probably doesn't pay off.
It just depends on where you're getting them and what kind of league you're in. If you're in a 2 quarterback league, it makes sense to get Mahomes early. Maybe it makes sense to get 2 quarterbacks early, but it's hard to argue against Patrick Mahomes being the number one. And I think anyone not putting him there is crazy at this point. All right. Well, that was our top 15 quarterback rankings. I really hope you guys enjoyed that and maybe influenced you guys on some of your drafts coming up. But that does it for this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you so much for listening or downloading this episode. Please do not forget to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment and share the show. Even to mock us, even to say, "You're so wrong, Jeff. How could you possibly make that terrible mistake of leaving Geno Smith off your list?" Or, "Alex, why do you have a rookie in your top 15 quarterbacks? What a dum-dum." Please leave those comments. I know it doesn't seem like it, but it does help. Every little bit helps us. So thank you guys.
Absolutely. And as you know, and as you could ask everyone that's close to me, I am never wrong. So let's get that straight. Just want to make sure we're crystal clear on that. And as always, you can find us with our handle at N2EFantasy on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok. There are new videos on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Threads. Please give us a follow. And until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
Bye, everybody.